At midnight, 5 kilograms of gold disappeared from a mansion with a security system that never failed and cameras that caught everything. No forced entry, no blind spots, nothing out of place. Investigators could have worked with that. What they couldn't explain was the homeowner already standing outside when the masked men arrived, as if he'd known exactly what was coming and simply stepped aside to let it happen. The mansion sat on a quiet hill in the kind of neighborhood where nothing was supposed to go wrong. Locked gates, cameras covering every angle, guards who knew their posts. Then at 2:13 a.m., glass broke, alarms went off, and masked men were inside. By sunrise, the media had already packaged it neatly. A high-risk robbery, the kind that makes headlines for a day and gets forgotten by the next. The gold didn't even belong to Daniel, the homeowner. It belonged to his wife, Elena. 5 kilograms her family had passed down to her. She went to the police that same morning, told them everything, and they listened, and procedures and paperwork, and reasons why they couldn't do it just yet. She walked out with nothing in her hands, and the very next morning she came straight to me, which said more than enough about how much she trusted what she was being told. When I went through the CCTV footage from that night, the first thing that caught my eye wasn't the robbery itself, but what happened 2 hours before it. At 12:04 a.m., Daniel was already outside, and 3 masked men were standing right in front of him, and for about 10 minutes, it just looked like a conversation, calm and quiet, nothing alarming. But then something shifted between them. Voices got louder. Daniel stepped forward, and one of the men pulled out a gun. Daniel stopped moving. The men left. And that was it. Then at 2:13 a.m., the exact same 3 figures came back, walked straight in, and moved through that property like they had been there 100 times before, hitting every turn and every access point without a single moment of hesitation. But what I kept coming back to, the thing I couldn't get past, was that Daniel had already been standing at gunpoint 2 hours earlier and hadn't called the police once. He just went back inside and waited for them to return. The deeper I looked into this, the less it felt like a random robbery, and the more it felt like something that had been building for a long time. Elena's gold wasn't just valuable, it was inherited, transferred to her legally by her mother before she passed. Clean paperwork, no dispute. Case closed as far as the law was concerned. But her brother never accepted that. For months, he had been pushing for a share, not through lawyers or formal requests, but just showing up, calling, pressuring, operating on the belief that being family gave him a right that the documents said it didn't. Elena turned him down every single time. And then there was Daniel, whose business records told a quieter but equally uncomfortable story. Losses piling up, loans taken out to cover older loans, the financial picture of someone trying to hold everything together while things slowly came apart. He had brought up selling the gold more than once, framing it as a temporary fix, a practical decision, nothing to read into. But Elena refused him too, which meant that by the time the robbery happened, those 5 kilograms had become the one thing in that house that 3 different people wanted control over, and only one of them actually had it. The timeline never sat right with me, and the more I went through it, the more things started to feel arranged rather than accidental. Daniel said the men showed up. They argued, a gun came out. He tried to fight back, and they hit him before leaving. But the medical report described minor bruises and a few surface scratches, which didn't match the story of 3 armed men who had just been pushed back by the homeowner. But what stayed with me was a small moment in the footage where the gun appeared and Daniel shifted slightly to the left, just enough to put himself between the camera and whatever was being exchanged. Not enough to block it completely, but enough to make you wonder whether that was a nervous instinct or something more deliberate, because instincts don't usually account for camera angles. And then there was Elena's brother, who 3 days before the robbery withdrew a large sum of cash and told anyone who asked that it was for a business deal, which it very well could have been. But the timing sat right up against everything else in a way that was hard to ignore. So at this point, I had a husband drowning in debt who had been pushing to sell the gold for months, and a brother who believed he was owed a share of it and had just moved a significant amount of money around days before it disappeared. For a moment, it all seemed to point in one direction, and it would have been easy to wrap it up there. Daniel needed money. Elena's brother wanted the gold. The robbery was suspicious, case more or less explained. But something kept pulling me back, because crimes that come from desperation tend to be messy and rushed. and this one wasn't either of those things. The timing was too exact, the entry too clean, and even that argument at 12:04 a.m. had a strange quality to it, almost like it was following a script rather than falling apart the way real confrontations do. And then there was the audio. Most people had skimmed past it, but when I slowed it down, Daniel's voice came through clearly. "You weren't supposed to." And then nothing, just a hard stop, like someone who realized mid-sentence that they were still being recorded. That kind of correction doesn't come from fear. It comes from someone who knows exactly what they almost gave away. The robbery made sense, the motives made sense, but the whole shape of it felt engineered, like everyone involved knew their role and played it, which left me with one question I couldn't shake. Who had built all of this from the beginning, and who was the mastermind behind it? Daniel had stopped giving me anything useful, every answer polished and prepared like he had rehearsed it the night before, so I stopped pushing him and called Elena's brother instead. And he showed up so fast, it was almost its own kind of answer. He walked in looking alert rather than confused, and before I had said a single word, he asked what happened, which was a strange thing to lead with when nobody had told him anything was wrong. I didn't respond. I just put a file on the table. Bank withdrawal records from 3 days before the robbery, call logs between him and Daniel from that same night, and an enhanced still from the CCTV showing a watch on one of the masked men that matched the one sitting on his wrist right now. Whatever confidence he had walked in with left his face quietly and quickly, and after a long silence, he said, "It wasn't my plan," which was interesting because I hadn't accused him of anything yet. He hesitated for a moment and then gave me a name. Sophia, Daniel's girlfriend, the woman he wanted to leave Elena for, who was buried in debt and needed a way out that was fast and clean and large enough to actually matter. She had come to Daniel with the whole thing mapped out: stage the robbery, claim the insurance, remove Elena from the picture, and start over somewhere else. And Daniel had given her access to everything she needed, while the brother handled the timing and the coordination on the ground. But I don't close cases on nervous confessions, so I went through Daniel's phone records and found encrypted calls, deleted messages recovered from cloud backups, and eventually a voice recording of Daniel, calm and unhurried, saying, "We'll follow the plan exactly the way you said," with no hesitation and no doubt in his voice at all. And just like that, the robbery stopped being a mystery and became something much more calculated. A performance, written by Sophia, rehearsed by everyone, and staged down to the minute. Once the recording was verified, Daniel was the first to go, and what struck me was how quietly he accepted it. No argument, no lawyer, just the same words on repeat. It wasn't supposed to go this far. Sophia tried to disappear, but debt leaves a trail, and hers led straight back to her through transfers, payments to the masked men, and deleted messages that hadn't been deleted carefully enough. When they brought her in, she wasn't scared. She was irritated, like someone more bothered by the failure than by what she had actually done. Elena's brother cooperated once he saw how much evidence was already on the table, and his role was exactly what it looked like: coordination, timing, and greed. He had dressed up as resentment to make it easier to live with. The officer who had turned Elena away without filing a complaint turned out to be connected to an offshore transfer made 2 days before the robbery, and internal affairs handled the rest. Daniel was charged with conspiracy and fraud, Sophia with criminal conspiracy and organized theft, the brother with facilitation, and the officer was indicted. The gold was recovered untouched from a storage unit registered under a fake company Sophia had set up. But Elena sold the mansion anyway and moved to a quieter place by the coast. And from what I heard, she seemed at peace with that. The case closed